Never mix family and real estate. My landlord, my brother, and his girlfriend harassed me over a locked door while my home fell apart. I have a life, Mom, I cried. Now they're pressuring us into shady contracts and I'm drowning in anxiety. How did it come to this? I will begin by explaining how I transitioned into a 5.5 unit in 2021. My new landlord implored me verbally to vacate my 3.5 unit to move into a 5.5 unit for the same price of 670, which was my rent back in 2019. I understood they needed funds to help cover the rent for the building they owned, so I agreed. My new landlord stated verbally that I could move in with 2 months of free rent, and by the time I moved in, the place would be repaired as it only required minor fixes. I was convinced. For the same price, I would have a larger space, and I had a 9-month-old baby at the time and was planning to have a second child. I informed my previous landlord about my intention to move and not continue my lease with them. They happily accepted my decision. A month before my planned move-out date, I inquired with the new landlord if the repairs had been completed. They replied that the work was not yet finished, but it would be done before I moved in again verbally. I convinced myself to continue paying rent for the first 2 months, which I did. However, a week before my move and while coordinating with my movers, I discovered that the repairs were still not made. At that point, I suppose it was my fault for believing it would be completed, thinking that the issues were minor, albeit still hazardous. Some doors lacked doorknobs, one room did not have a door, ceiling lights were dangling, wires for the light switch were exposed, there were cracks between the walls, some windows would not open, and some heaters were not functioning properly. The landlord kept claiming they did not have the funds to make the repairs, but I had no choice but to move because I had nowhere else to go on short notice. After moving in, a month later I received a bill from the hydro company stating that I owed 810. My landlord had assured me verbally that the bill would be around 100 to 200. I was alarmed and texted them, expressing my concern that this was not what I had been told and requested my money back. Essentially, the building is a duplex, but the landlord was utilizing the basement as a triplex, which resulted in the electricity bill being charged to me. I was paying for the basement. I complained and insisted that they separate the charges or I would ask the new tenant who was moving in downstairs to split the electricity bill with me. The landlord ultimately paid the entire 800 bill and hired an electrician to separate the downstairs hydro. I kept my mouth shut and accepted that if the separation was completed, it would be beneficial. My gullibility led me to agree to an equalizer payment arrangement for hydro, which I did. Consequently, my hydro bills for the following 2 months decreased to around 250. I let it slide and thought to myself that I would take their word for it. I know it seems foolish, but I ask you not to judge me too harshly. To this day, I am uncertain if I am still responsible for paying the hydro bill for the downstairs unit, because it was separated and designated as a second address after I complained about the 800 hydro bill. Almost a year later, my neighbor upstairs moved in and was also promised the same things I had been, but nothing was followed through. They subsequently initiated legal actions against the landlord about 6 months after moving in. They asked me to sign the paperwork to do the same, but I declined because I did not want to create problems for the landlord, knowing they were already struggling with their bills and repairs. I refused the request, which made them unhappy. They managed to get the people downstairs to sign the papers. Our upstairs neighbors began to complain when we locked the front door of the building. They would yell in the hallway that they would kick me, my toddler, and my husband out for locking the door. Can you believe that? At the time I was pregnant with baby number 2, I wanted to avoid conflict, so I attempted to steer clear of them. My husband, however, was not accepting their threats and confronted them, which led to increased tension. Keep in mind that we were both sleep-deprived with a newborn at this point. 5 days after I gave birth, my husband went outside while our neighbor was walking his dog to confront him, asking him what his problem was. The neighbor responded angrily, questioning why we were locking the doors. My husband replied that it was normal to do so. The neighbor then retorted, saying they complained about the door being locked at 3 p.m. because that is when their kids returned from school. I stepped outside in an attempt to separate them and prevent a fight, yelling for them to stop, and the neighbor's girlfriend came outside to calm him down. I tried to push him away from my husband to prevent an altercation, but refused to press charges. At that point, the police arrived and asked if we wanted to press charges, as we had a doorbell camera that recorded everything. They stated that the neighbor was clearly being aggressive toward us and attempting to provoke a fight. They inquired how we knew he was cursing at us, and we responded that we had footage of them complaining about the locked door and that when they walked upstairs, we could clearly hear them cursing at us because they were yelling. As time passed, the downstairs neighbors changed their minds about taking the landlord to court and were forced to vacate the premises because they had signed an acknowledgement that there was mold in the basement. The city arrived and confirmed that nobody should be living downstairs until repairs were completed. Since our upstairs neighbors moved in, there have been leaks from our ceiling in the toilet and kitchen. Consequently, my ceiling is now damaged, which I suspect might have been intentional, but who knows? I notified my landlord about the leaks. They were already aware because they were facing court for failing to fix the issues upstairs. I also have footage of them stealing our mail from my camera, but the police claimed it was not sufficient evidence, as they could just be retrieving their own mail despite my mailbox being on the left and theirs on the right. Regardless, this has happened on multiple occasions, and I have about 5 or 6 videos of them taking mail from my mailbox. Since we informed the police following the near-fight incident, they ceased this behavior as instructed by law enforcement. I assure you I prefer to remain reserved. I do not like conflict and have tried to avoid creating problems throughout my life. I have never been to court. My upstairs neighbor ultimately went to court for the first 3 months of unpaid rent because they lacked written proof that the rent was free. They also grew frustrated with me for not supporting the idea of taking the landlord to court. Fast forward to the summer of 2024, my landlord asked me to engage in illegal activities. I refused because I do not want to be involved in anything unethical. They wanted me to sign a new lease with terms dated 2 years earlier. This was supposedly to show the bank that they were collecting more rent from me, which would help them obtain a larger loan as proof of income. I once again declined to participate. The landlord made this request in 2023, and I had already told them not to involve me in any illegal activities they were pursuing. Behind my back, they then approached my husband, asking him to sign it despite his name not even being on the lease. Of course, my husband refused and informed me. I was upset because this was the second time they had made such a request. I have cameras in my house that recorded the entire conversation in which they asked me to sign a new lease. I am genuinely grateful for that. The landlord became enraged and left the building. The day after my refusal, a large sign was placed in front of the building indicating that it was for sale. I met the real estate agent, who was a very amiable individual. I attempted to compromise with him and set up viewing appointments for potential buyers. However, they were only allowed to visit my unit, and the visitors were prohibited from seeing the downstairs unit. The upstairs neighbor completely refused to allow any visitors until their unit had been repaired. Throughout the year, I had visitors coming in and out of my unit exclusively, which was a complete waste of time because real estate agents were constantly asking about the condition of both upstairs and downstairs, yet they could not view them. Fast forward to this winter, since there were no tenants downstairs, the house was freezing cold. I wore socks in the kitchen and my feet froze from standing for 10 minutes. I informed the real estate agent that I was willing to pay more in rent, but the condition of this place did not justify an increase. My door had cracks between it that allowed wind to seep in, and he deemed that a minor issue that could be repaired. I then questioned why that had not been completed yet. I explained that if this place had features that justified a rent increase, I would consider it. Moreover, they had renovated my toilet with aesthetically pleasing tiles and other enhancements that I never requested. I was unable to use the toilet at home because the landlord wanted a more visually appealing restroom. Nothing was wrong with the toilet until the leaks occurred, yet they still failed to address the ceiling damage and leakage, focusing solely on aesthetics. Everything was functioning well originally, but keep in mind that the leakage has persisted for over 2 years and is still an issue. In February, the real estate agent came and asked me to sign a document stating that I would move out in June with 3 months of free rent. He claimed that signing this would assist the landlord in selling the property. I, of course, refused and stated that I could only move if they paid an entire year's rent because I was on unpaid maternity leave. I do not have daycare for my 10-month-old and refuse to enroll her until she can communicate verbally. I also informed him that I intended to leave, but not in the immediate future. After 2 years of sending videos to the landlord documenting the leaks, mail theft, and confrontational neighbors, the landlord has finally decided to make repairs. On Thursday, my landlord stated that they wanted to complete some repairs. However, they did not provide me with specific times or dates or outline what work would be performed. They demanded the keys to my unit. On Friday, I replied asking what work would be done and informed them that I would not provide my keys, as any repairs should only take place while I am home during the times I can provide, specifically on Tuesday when my husband receives his new schedule for April. I received no response from the landlord. On Saturday today, the landlord showed up at my door when I was not home. They called, insisting on getting the keys to access my unit. I informed them that I was not home and they inquired how far I was and if I could return immediately. At this point, I was so overwhelmed and disheartened by everything that had happened that I replied, "I have a life, Mom." They proceeded to call the police and fire department. Since I was not home, nothing occurred and they ultimately left. Oh, and my upstairs neighbor was my older brother, while my downstairs neighbor is his younger brother. This situation is disheartening. Never conduct business with family. It has torn us apart. I could not bear to involve my mother or brother in court or any legal actions because it would cause me so much pain. We were not always like this until we ended up in this building. I am crying inside. I am incredibly stressed and unsure of what to do. I feel overwhelmed. I promise I will move out of this toxic environment. Today, the anxiety about the phone call had me trembling. My heart will ache for the rest of my life. Story 2. My fiancée lies about small things just to protect her image, even after her infidelity led to trust issues. She said, "I didn't want you to see me that way," while I caught her stealing my unopened pack of cigs. Can I still trust her after 8 years together? She compulsively lies about matters that she fears may impact my perception of her, and fails to understand that the dishonesty is far worse than the issues she is lying about. This may already be a deal breaker for some, which I cannot blame you for, but it is essential context that 5 years ago, she had a brief affair with a coworker that created a significant breach of trust between us. She gradually revealed details for weeks and ultimately sought therapy to understand why she engaged in such behavior. Since then, we have worked to rekindle our connection, with a focus on honesty serving as the foundational element that would keep us together. The current situation pertains to the fact that both of us quit smoking cigarettes and vaping 4.5 years ago. We made the commitment, read Alan Carr's book, and agreed that we were finished with it. A couple of years later, I discovered that she had maxed out her credit card by using rideshare services for work and indulging in food delivery, which spiraled out of control and only became evident when it was declined for a meal at a restaurant. We already had debt we were trying to pay off, and this setback was significant. I urged her to come clean about anything else, and she admitted to keeping a vape at her workplace despite our commitment to quit. This was, of course, a regression in the progress I thought we had made, but once again she appeared remorseful and expressed a desire to move forward positively, so I made an effort to forgive her and move on. Just a couple of days ago, I discovered a lighter in her coat pocket while doing laundry. When I confronted her about it, she initially tried to fabricate a story, claiming she had simply found it around our apartment. We both smoke cannabis, but primarily through vaporizers, making it unusual for a lighter to be lying about. Ultimately, her excuse fell apart, and she confessed to still smoking the occasional cigarette at work with her colleagues. What truly troubled me about this situation was that I had a full, unopened pack of cigarettes stashed in a cabinet that I had purchased for myself a couple of years ago during a night of drinking. On that night, I had opened the pack, taken a sniff, and decided I did not actually want one, which was a gratifying moment for me and a testament to my successful quitting. I kept the pack as a sort of memento, proving to myself that even with a full pack of cigarettes in the house, I was still not tempted to smoke them. Although it may not hold material significance, it carried symbolic meaning for me. My fiancée's occasional smoking led to her taking that pack to work without me noticing, which I did not realize until she was caught in her deception. She attempted to justify her actions by saying she did not want me to see her that way. In my mind, this reasoning does not make sense because this is not the first time she has been discovered using nicotine. I had to explain that I would prefer to support her through her addiction by allowing her to use a vape or something else while she figured out how she wanted to quit. However, she convinced herself that I would instantly end our relationship if I found out and wanted to avoid the potential conflict and discomfort that would accompany acknowledging her wrongdoing. This is despite the fact that our most significant conflicts have always arisen due to her dishonesty, not the issue itself. I have focused on many negatives, so now I would like to highlight some positives. My fiancée is the kindest person I have ever met. Her mother was a compulsive liar who stole from every friend she ever had, dragging my fiancé along and burning every bridge they crossed. She has endured various forms of trauma and has been abused in multiple ways. When she tells me she loves me and wants to address these issues, I see the genuine remorse in her eyes, indicating that she does not want to continue this way. Apart from the occasional lies that surface every few years, we are a happy, functional couple with a comfortable life. So why does she persist in sabotaging that by making me question my trust in her? She has been journaling about her reasons for lying and is actively seeking an appointment with a therapist to address these matters. She has also suggested couples therapy to me, demonstrating a willingness to work through this. However, I am increasingly struggling to comprehend how it is fair to me to continue doubting her honesty. It seems that every time I settle in and become comfortable, she is caught in another lie, causing all the mistrust and hurt to resurface. I worry that she has not changed at all and simply does not trust herself to get by without me, which leads her to keep stringing me along and asking for forgiveness since I have shown I will grant it repeatedly. I am also seeing a therapist for my obsessive-compulsive tendencies and am working on healing from my own trauma. I have grappled with issues related to pornography addiction and self-doubt, so I am not trying to portray myself as a perfect partner. My fiancé is aware of these challenges. Ultimately, my decision will be my own, as I acknowledge that every relationship is unique, and a Reddit post cannot adequately represent an 8-year relationship. I am merely seeking validation of my feelings and a place to express these thoughts, as solely journaling without feedback is not assisting me in determining my next steps. Summary: my partner compulsively lies about relatively minor issues, despite her infidelity 5 years ago necessitating sincere communication in our relationship. I do not believe she would cheat again, but the small lies continue to exacerbate old wounds, and I am trying to determine how to progress when nearly everything else about our relationship is exceptionally positive.